The NFL season is fast approaching, and we know that camps are going to start here in less than a month. Actually, we're a couple of weeks away from the start of camp, which is very exciting that we'll start to see these NFL teams formally get on the field and start working toward the 2020 season, even as we're learning more about what attendance might look like at NFL games, which certainly looks like it won't be capacity stadiums, but they're going to play. And the Saints have a tremendous amount of expectation. As we all know, they're projected to win the NFC South, and there's no reason not to think that. But what's very interesting to me is typically when you're projecting a season, you'll get three different sort of opinions. You'll get commentators, right, talking heads, just yokels like me. You'll get Vegas, the odds makers, and then there's the computers. What do the computers say? Well, I've given my take on the Saints season. People have asked. I said I think 13-3 is very possible again, and we've gone through the schedule. And Vegas, which obviously Vegas is looking at practicality, something they're trying to solicit wagers on both sides of the line. Ideally, they'd have equal money on both sides of the line. So Vegas has the Saints pegged at 10.5 wins, which is the best in the NFC, second best in all of the NFL. So ideally, you'd think if they went over, they'd hit 11, so it'd be 11-5, which might be realistic. And then you have the computers. And typically when we think about the NFL, most people are going to look at Pro Football Focus. They tend to be the standard bearer. Well, Pro Football Focus looked at their best and worst case scenarios for all 32 NFL teams. And what they did is they looked at every NFL team in a range from the high end, which they said was the 90th percentile of their simulations, to the low end, which would be the 10th percentile of their simulations. Then they gave sort of a reasoning for. So, for example, the Patriots, they say in the 90th percentile, on the highest end, like where the Patriots could max out this year, would be 11-5. In the 10th percentile, the lowest end of their projections, they look at the Patriots at 6-10. So that would be a bottoming out. So they went team by team all throughout the entire NFL, all 32 teams as far as what their projections are. They went by division. They looked at the Saints. And for the Saints, the 10th percentile projection, so the bottoming out, the lowest for the Saints, they project Pro Football Focus at 7-9. That would be a bottoming out for New Orleans. That's familiar because we've seen New Orleans hit 7-9 when they went back-to-back 7-9 seasons when the defense was historically bad and Breeze was really without a much of a running game and was throwing, he was throwing 40 times a game because he was, out of necessity playing catch-up. Well, they talk about the reasoning for how it could happen, and they mentioned Drew Brees stepping down from the elite level. But it points out even if that happens, you still got Jameis Winston, and it would have to be Winston reverting to form of a year ago, throwing caution to the wind and throwing a bunch of interceptions. And they write, if the Saints offense is forced to make that transition midseason, it could lead to disappointing results for one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. On the high end, however, Pro Football Focus projects the New Orleans Saints, their 90th percentile projection, they look at 12-4. They write, Breeze remains one of the game's elite quarterbacks. Veterans like Emmanuel Sanders, Malcolm Jenkins add depth to an already talented roster. What Michael Thomas was able to do last season was impressive, but I'm sure New Orleans would be happy to have someone like Sanders share the load. They talk about how Jenkins could provide another versatile safety to pair with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, with plenty of options when it comes to filling the box covering slot receivers. Some of you may look at that. I know we all want to think positively, want to think optimistically about how the season may go. And the thing that I have to keep reminding myself whenever we talk about the Saints for 2020, it's not just that we're optimistic or Breeze is still there. The fact of the matter is that this is a team that has won more games than any other team in the NFL over the last 3 years. They're a really stinking good football team. And when you look at the Saints' strength of schedule this year, they have the 9th easiest strength of schedule in the NFL this year. And it may feel counterintuitive when you look at how some of it's stacked, but the reality is that number doesn't lie. Now, Tampa wasn't very good this year. We expect Tampa to be better, so maybe that clouds it a bit. But when you look at how the season starts, The Saints will be favored at home to win against Tampa. They'll be favored in Las Vegas against the Raiders. They'll be favored at home against Green Bay and on the road at Detroit and at home against the Chargers. They'll be favored out the shoot in their first 5 games. Then they go into their bye. Sean Payton, under Sean Payton, the Saints have been fantastic coming out of their bye. Then they're home against Carolina, at Chicago, at Tampa, all winnable games. It's entirely possible the Saints could hit the turn at 8-0. And yes, it gets tougher after there, but they'll play San Francisco in the Dome. They'll play Atlanta in the Dome. They have that tough stretch of back-to-back-to-back road games, but at Denver's winnable, at Atlanta's winnable, and at Philly's winnable. And yes, you come home to play Kansas City, but that's a home game in the Dome. And then the Friday night game against Minnesota, remember, yes, that's a short week, but it's a short week for Minnesota too, and they have to travel. And then you finish on the road at Carolina, which isn't going to be a very good team. I guess my point is you're going to expect slip-ups along the way. No doubt, it's the NFL. But it's extremely plausible. You could look at the Saints shooting out to start the season, like firing out of a cannon, and still finishing somewhere in that 12-4, 13-3 range, and hopefully getting the number 1 seed again. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.